Welcome to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a ton of stuff to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest communities on YouTube when it comes to covering the Orlando Magic. So remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And let's go ahead and get right into it. We have a handful of things to discuss, but it's going to be a very quick episode, a lot of EuroBasket and a couple of quick hitters with something at the end that I think should be an intriguing, forward-thinking topic. Something that doesn't necessarily deal with the Orlando Magic directly and doesn't even deal with the Orlando Magic this season, but something to take into account given that the Orlando Magic's window is about the next 3 to 4 years when you consider the contract situations of the core four. But we'll get to that part later on in the episode. Let's start off with Goga Bitadze and Team Georgia as their EuroBasket journey has come to an end. They fell to Lauri Markkanen and Finland the other day in the quarterfinals, a game in which they lost in convincing fashion 93-79. A game where Finland was absolutely blitzing them from beyond the arc. They hit 55% of their threes, and to be honest, this was a game that even when it got close, seemed like it never was really in reach for Team Georgia. There was a point where Team Georgia dropped this deficit from being 20 points down to 6, and then a big-time three by a player named Miro Little pretty much kind of sent everything into a spiral from that point forward. Of course, by spiral, I also mean Goga Bitadze. Goga Bitadze, right after that dagger three that kind of helped put everything back out of reach, ends up getting ejected for an unsportsmanlike foul that then led to his night ending with 14 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 blocks. We just had this conversation in the other podcast. Literally, the last discussion about Goga Bitadze was his ability to maintain composure being an important factor for the Orlando Magic as a guy that you want to give more responsibility in the center rotation. He is a talented player. Again, 14 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, a very solid all-around performance despite the fact that this game was never truly close. But for your team, playing for your country, to allow your personal frustration to get you put out of the game, if the sails weren't knocked on from that big time three right beforehand, the sails truly were clipped once you get yourself ejected. Goga Bitadze, this is going to be the thing that ends up taking him from being the $20 to $25 million a year player that I think a lot of Orlando Magic fans believe he is, and drop him down to being a budget baller. He's going to be a $10 million, $12 million a year backup center for the rest of his career. This is the type of stuff that's going to not only hinder his ability to make more money long term within his career, something that I'm a big advocate for, but it's also going to hurt his overall ability to maximize his talent as a guy who I do believe should be a starting center somewhere in the NBA. He is a luxury item for the Orlando Magic right now coming off the bench for them with what kind of talent he brings to the table. Truthfully, he is a luxury item for the Orlando Magic. But could he be one of the 30 starting centers in the NBA on one of these? Heck yeah. He could start for the Charlotte Hornets right now. I think they just drafted Ryan Kalkbrenner as the guy who basically has to start for center for them now that they moved off of Mark Williams. Could Goga Bitadze start for that team? Yes. Yes, he could. Could Goga Bitadze be a starter on the version of the Indiana Pacers that they now no longer have Miles Turner and they have a situation where Isaiah Jackson, who's seriously injury prone, is now their starting center? Yes. He could go back to Indiana and start right for them right now. Yes, he could. Before they traded for Malowach and traded for Mark Williams, could the Phoenix Suns have taken on a player like Goga Bitadze and started him at center versus Nurkic? Yes. Yes, they could. All of that to say Goga Bitadze is talented enough, given the center pool that we have seen over the last 2 to 3 years. Goga Bitadze is talented enough to be a starting center in this league. But stuff like this ends up hindering his ability to truly get that done. Stuff like this hinders his ability to show off how high level of a talent he truly is. Stuff like this is going to be the reason why sometime during this season, the Orlando Magic are going to be costed. I'm knocking on wood praying it doesn't happen. But at some point during this season, the Orlando Magic are going to be costed by a decision by Goga Bitadze. That's either going to hurt their center rotation, going to put them in a bad spot during a literal game, or it's going to cause the Orlando Magic to have to do something they probably don't want to do right at this moment, which is to pull the plug on Goga. Hopefully the infrastructure of the NBA will allow something like this to be tempered, but we've seen Goga Bitadze literally be a combatant with a head coach back when he was with Indiana, right? So we know that this is a guy that his temperament tends to bleed out on his sleeve, so to speak. And it's going to be really interesting to see as Goga continues to get closer and closer to this contract year, how he's able to maintain face and be the professional he needs to be in order to get paid, in order for people to consider him as the starting caliber center that he is. I'm passionate about Goga Bitadze and these type of issues because I know that he is a guy that truly deserves to be a starting center strictly off the talent. These type of issues are the things that take away from the talent, become the politics, and become the reason you go from being a guy that should be making $20+ million a year to being a guy that's lucky to be cracking double digits. And even more lucky to be coming off of someone's bench. Shout out to Goga Bitadze. Shout out to Team Georgia. You guys excelled expectations by a decent amount this season. Very good quarterfinals run for Team Georgia. Big time wins along the way. Shout out to them once again. Next, we're going to move on to Franz Wagner and Team Germany, whose EuroBasket journey is not over, right? They actually defeated Team Slovenia in the quarterfinals to advance to the semifinal round. This was a game that they won, probably one of their closest matchups throughout the EuroBasket run for them, 99-91, in which this was a hard battle. The best way to describe it is Luka Doncic had a near 40-piece, 10 rebounds and 7 assists. I mean, this is exactly what Franz Wagner said about Luka Doncic. He's an amazing player. He made a couple of tough shots, obviously. I think we can guard him a little bit better than we did, but super, super good player, so it's tough sometimes. Truthfully speaking, we all know that Luka Doncic is a tough cover. He's considered one of the top 5 to 8 players in the NBA for a reason. For context, by the way, Franz Wagner finished the night with 23 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Big time performance for Franz in a highly anticipated matchup against a all-world caliber player. A game where Luka Doncic pretty much backpacks Team Slovenia, as he tends to do for the most part anyway, against a Team Germany that is just a little bit more well-rounded across the board. Franz Wagner was able to still be their takeover guy. They were in a situation where Tristan da Silva was also able to provide in a real way. He had 5 points and 3 rebounds, was really a big-time defender in this game. Dennis Schroeder added 20 points and 7 assists in this matchup as well. But this was all about being able to guard Luka Doncic. And you can't contain Luka. You can't. That's not the name of the game here, is to contain him. But forcing him to be the sole offensive engine around others that cannot self-shot create is your best formula to beat any Luka Doncic team. Even with the Lakers, I would say forcing Luka Doncic to play takeover mode is much more appealing of an option than allowing him to spray to other guys like LeBron James, DeAndre Ayton, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, right? You'd rather Luka drop 40 and everybody else is just trying to figure out where they land than for Luka to have 28, but he's got 11, 12, 13 assists like he's capable of doing, right? Big time game for Team Germany. Nothing really super crazy to say about this one, given the fact that they were able to get the job done. Franz Wagner performed at a high level in a game that mattered a ton in their journey to make it to the semifinals, where they will be playing Team Finland. And honestly, I could see Germany still being alive. I think that Germany probably even goes into this game as a pretty heavy favorite against Team Finland, to be honest with you. And we will probably still be talking about France and Germany in the coming days, about them being, ready to play for a EuroBasket championship. Next, let's move on to something a little bit different, a little lighthearted, but not necessarily about on court stuff per se. CBS Sports ranked the Orlando Magic as having the sixth best jerseys in the NBA going into next season. Seems as though the CBS writer had a little bit of a soft spot. Shout out to him. I should probably quote his name. CBS Sports writer Sam Quinn ranked all 30 NBA teams NBA teams in terms of their primary jerseys going into next season. And it seems that Quinn is a bit of a sucker for pinstripes, it seems. The Magic exploded out of the gates with some of the most beloved jerseys in history before slowly stripping away everything that made them iconic. Now we're back. Pinstripes, stars, it's 1995 all over again. Well, maybe not quite. The font is streamlined in a way that certainly is more modern, but isn't quite as magical. My biggest complaint is the splotch of blue on the black pinstripe statement edition. The black pinstripes are probably the definitive Magic jersey. So if any of the originals should have been adapted faithfully, it should have been them. The blue is an immediate distraction on an already fairly busy design. Still, the Magic largely nailed this redesign. It's a substantial improvement on their last 20 years or so. I'm sure everybody's a big fan of the pinstripe jerseys coming back as a primary. I'm sure everybody's a bit of a fan. I think when it comes to a lot of these jerseys, when it comes to, let's say, the Bulls, the Magic, I think that the teal pinstripe version for the Charlotte Hornets is a very interesting jersey as well, right? I think when it comes to the NBA jersey build, bit of a sucker for pinstripes across the board. I think a lot of people tend to be fans of that design overall. I think the fact that they ranked Orlando as sixth best, I thought was really interesting when you talk about the primary jerseys. I think that's a very important factor because obviously if we were talking about, overall jersey packages, I think Orlando would still be up there. But I think, teams like Toronto, who were not favored very much in this listing, they were 27th. Their main jersey, of course, is the one that's kind of like the big red arrow with Raptors written within it, things like that. But if they had their full arsenal, maybe they're ranked a little bit higher. The Bulls were ranked number one for those who are interested, and definitely feel free to check out the jersey. He does kind of go in decent detail about why he likes or dislikes just about every jersey in the NBA for all 30 teams. The Bulls were number one. Utah was in the top 10, mainly because of the purple mountain redesigned jersey that they have, which is a pretty dope jersey. They were number 7 right behind the Magic. Golden State was in the top 5. Charlotte, who I mentioned with the pinstripes, was at number 4. And the two traditionals being Boston and Chicago Bulls were at the very top. The rest of the list is pretty interesting. Again, feel free to check it out. I think it's actually a pretty interesting article if you're into NBA jerseys, if you're into the fashion aspect of building any kind of sports uniforms. Definitely an interesting read, and also could maybe give you a couple of pointers on what kind of jersey you would want to pick up this upcoming season. Just throwing that out there as well. So just thought that was a really interesting article and something a little bit lighthearted that doesn't have anything to do with the being on the floor necessarily, but nonetheless showing some love to the Orlando Magic for having one of the better jersey packages going into 2025-2026 season, and rightfully so because the rebrand is kind of tough. I'm not gonna lie, the rebrand is kind of tough. Last but not least, we're gonna talk about something a little bit on the heavier end, being could Kevin Durant still end up in the Eastern Conference? I read a report late last night that mentioned the idea that the Miami Heat are still looking to target Kevin Durant. And if he were to truly become a free agent, meaning that the Houston Rockets, who have not given him an extension yet, are unable to come to a long-term agreement with Kevin Durant, the Miami Heat would be a team highly, highly ready to throw the bag. Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald said, Durant will forever be a Heat possibility if he makes it to free agency. The Heat always has held him in high regard. This is a guy who is eligible for a 2-year, $118 million extension. Obviously, if you look at the track record of players that have often landed with the Miami Heat, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Jimmy Butler, this team has not had a ton of star power in quite some time. And although he is in, very advanced age compared to when they probably would have loved to get him, as many times as he's been rumored to the Miami Heat, he would still be a star attraction name that is also good enough in terms of what his permeability is as a player that can fit just about any system, that he would be worth throwing the bag to if he hits the open market. Why is this important? Kevin Durant hasn't been in the Eastern Conference since playing for the Brooklyn Nets a good handful of years ago. The last time he was in the Eastern Conference, he was a big toe away from being able to really pull off one of the bigger wins of that postseason against the Milwaukee Bucks. And that team, even with a hobbled James Harden and an injured Kyrie Irving, was considered as an Eastern Conference favorite and nearly did position themselves to make the NBA Finals. The Miami Heat, I believe, are a much more well-ran organization overall than the Brooklyn Nets were back then. Why does this matter to the Orlando Magic? Because, again, the window for the Magic is about 4 years. Kevin Durant's not going to span that entire time. I do not believe that. I genuinely don't. But what I do know is the star power shift in the NBA has leaned heavily towards the Western Conference, right? When you start to think about the East, you think Jalen Brunson, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, Tyrese Halliburton, Jaylen Brown, Paulo Banchero, Paul George to a lesser degree, right? LaMelo Ball, right? But the talent pool when you compare it to the Western Conference, especially with Kevin Durant included in it, significantly different. If Kevin Durant comes over to the Eastern Conference in this version of the East, even compared to back then when he played for Brooklyn, where the Eastern Conference was still pretty solid, by the way. Oh, excuse me, Giannis Antetokounmpo, of course, is in the Eastern Conference as well. Sorry. Kevin Durant would come back over and, when healthy, could come back over to the Eastern Conference as a part of a competent roster, or at least a competent front office that has the financial means, because we've seen it a million times where even when Pat Riley and those guys do not have money, they are able to pull off the cap flexibility to start signing guys who just happen to perfectly fit whatever mold of roster they're trying to build at the time, right? And an idea of having Kevin Durant, Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, Khalil Ware. They're probably going to have a decent draft pick this year because this is the team that I think is probably going to be middle of the pack, right? And a team that does draft relatively well, by the way, and has a good infrastructure in terms of developing talent as well. Kevin Durant would be playing on the most competent roster he's played on since Golden State, which actually is a lot further back than it seems. He would be playing on the most competent roster slash most underneath the most competent franchise since his years in Golden State, which is nearly a decade from now. I mean, a decade from then. And he would probably come in. Yes, Jason Tatum will be back. Damian Lillard's with the Portland Trailblazers now, so that's or back with the Portland Trailblazers. Tyrese Halliburton would come back, but I think there's a reality where Kevin Durant comes back to the Eastern Conference legitimately considered a top 3, top 5 at worst player in the Eastern Conference. Now, in his own conference in the West, Jokic, Shea, Luka, Anthony Edwards, right? Like, right. You can name a couple of names pretty quickly where you could say I feel confident that they're either significantly better than Kevin Durant at this junction, or they are just slightly a hedge above. But in the East, Kevin Durant, I mean, once you get past Giannis and maybe Jason Tatum, healthy Kevin Durant may calmly slide in as the third best player. And crosstown rival Miami Heat makes it a little bit worse when you think about it from the Magic perspective. Again, this is not something that affects this season. This is not something that affects the championship equity of the Orlando Magic going into this year. But it's something that I think is an interesting bit of news brought up now, given the fact that the Houston Rockets have not extended Kevin Durant just yet. And if Kevin Durant hits the open market, one of the teams in his quote-unquote preference list were the Miami Heat. Miami, San Antonio, and of course the Houston Rockets. There's a real situation where he could enter the conference back in the East, be the third best player in the East as part of a Miami team that would be looking to go for championship or bust once you bring him in, while you have Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero both also locked in under contract. You have a situation where you may be able to have some cap flexibility with guys like Terry Rozier, likely not on the roster by the end of this season. And you position yourself to have some real cap flexibility to maybe make a couple moves on the margins, something the Miami Heat practically specialize in. Not only does that put more onus on the Orlando Magic this season in terms of their progression, but it also makes more of it creates more of an urgency to understand that this window is not as wide as it seems, even though the contract situation says there's a 4-year window. There is a 4-year window given the contract situations. But this season becomes that much more important given that next year, Jason Tatum, Tyrese Halliburton, Giannis Antetokounmpo could be on the move for all we know. Whether he stays in conference or out of conference is its own question. Kevin Durant could come over to the East. Is Paul George and Joel Embiid right? We'll have to learn that based off of this year. There's so many different dynamics that are going to be taken into account next year that are not in play this season. The Orlando Magic need to capitalize off of the 2025-26 year, because I have a weird feeling that the 26-27 season for the Eastern Conference is going to be one of the biggest head scratchers and one of the more polarizing seasons that we have when we see all of those guys come back or potentially move into or out of the conference. So just a little bit of news that was brought up for the Miami Heat's sake, but something that does impact the championship window of a team like the Orlando Magic. So I thought it was really interesting. Let me know in the comment section down below. Am I tripping? Is Kevin Durant really got that much weight compared to like where he was? I mean, is he really as dangerous of a player still in 2025, 2026, in 2026, 2027 as I'm giving him credit for in terms of being able to move the needle that much in the Eastern Conference? Or do you guys think if Kevin Durant comes over to the East, like, oh man, this is going to put even more pressure on some of these other teams, including the Orlando Magic, to like really make a play because he's going to make things difficult in terms of winning a championship, or at least coming out of the Eastern Conference with a chance to win a championship. So let me know that in the comment section down below. But with that being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, as usual, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit the post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. I will see you guys tomorrow with some new news. But until then, peace.